Welcome to We Are Makers and another long form tutorial. This magic pop-up album was inspired by Sameera, one of our wonderful affiliates, and we are going to walk through and show you step by step exactly how to make this fun little album that pops up like this. I used different papers than Sameera did, but the concepts and everything are the same as her original reel. And we will link that original reel down below so you can take a look at Sameera's as well. Let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I like to mention that we do have a printable PDF for all of the instructions attached down below the video. And it has all of the tools that you will need listed out, all of the measurements for cutting ahead of time, and then step-by-step instructions that we are going to walk through together in this video. We are going to start by doing our cover first. So we're going to build this cover structure that will hold all of these awesome pop-up pages. These covers measure 4 by 4. So these are two 4 by 4 pieces of chipboard that I have cut to size, and then a 1 inch wide by 4 inch tall spine piece. So this is how our cover is going to come together, just like that. Let's go ahead and cover these with pattern paper. And how we do that, my favorite way is to go ahead and use double-sided tape. Now we have this awesome 2-inch wide double-sided tape, which is perfect for covering mini album covers. And I just put it straight onto the chipboard itself. I like to use a cutting knife to just slice it. I find that that's fastest for me for how I work. So this is just a self-healing mat and a craft knife. And then any excess, I can just line my craft knife right up against the chipboard and cut away any excess if it's a little bit too wide. I have my We Are Makers book cover guide. I'm just going to use that to burnish since that's what I have on hand here. I also like to use a weeding tool to just pull the backer off. I have two front and back cover pieces, and these are 5.5 by 5.5 square. Then I'm going to use that tool that I just burnished with to place this exactly in the middle. So this has a 3/4 inch gap, which is perfect for wrapping the pieces of paper around the covers to get nice, smooth, clean edges. And I just align my chipboard there. I'm going to keep this in here because I'm going to be using it with this tool a lot. Then I'm going to use the book cover guide, place it on the corner of the chipboard, and that gives me a perfect angle to cut off so that I have this little tiny gap here, which makes for nice little perfect corners. So we're going to do that to all 4 corners. So now we have those corners that are perfectly angled with a little gap here. Now we just need a little bit more adhesive. For my flaps here, I like to use a little bit thinner piece of tape, but you could go ahead and use the 2-inch again if you wanted to. All right, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and use my tool again to burnish. You could also use any kind of stylus for this, like a bone folder or anything like that. Okay. Usually I like to do the longer sides first, but since this is a square, it doesn't really matter. So we're just going to start somewhere and start folding them in and work our way around. And I like to get a crisp corner by actually pressing up and over like this, just to be careful not to get your adhesive down. I'm actually going to pull the stylus out of my works tool here that I'm going to work with in a moment to use to burnish these. And I like to press down the little spot right there that is that extra little gap to get the clean corner. I like to press that down into the adhesive. Now we'll do the other 2 sides. And now we have our finished front cover. We'll cover the inside in a moment, but now we're going to repeat that process with the second cover for the back cover. Okay, now we've got both our front and back covers ready to continue. Let's start working on the spine. We're going to construct this in a very similar way. So I've already added double-sided tape to this 1x4 chipboard piece. Then I'm also going to be working with this 3x5-inch pattern paper for the outer spine. And it's a contrasting color to my outer covers, the front and back covers. So you can do it the same as these if you would want to, but I followed Sameera's example and I'm going to do it a contrasting paper. Then I'm just going to do my best to center this in the middle of this piece of paper. Then we're going to fold the top and the bottom edges down using double-sided tape again. Just the same way we did the front and back covers, I'm just going to fold it toward the center. I'm going to use my bone folder to crease that really close to that piece of chipboard. So we have a nice little space for our hinge. So these will adhere, these little side pieces that are still left exposed will be how we'll adhere it to the front and back covers. To make this a more seamless attachment here, I'm going to angle cut just these edges just ever so slightly. And I just freehand it with my scissors, just so that if it's not perfectly square or perfectly aligned, these corners won't show off the edge of the album on all four sides. All right, now we just need to adhere this piece to the inside of our covers just like this. So we're going to put double-sided tape on this side. I like to put it about, see where the fold is there? I do it just about 1/8 of an inch to the side of that so it has room for the paper to bend around the corner of the spine. Close enough to the edge that it's secure, but not so close that our spine gap gets interference from the adhesive. So you can kind of see that there. There's about 1/8 of an inch on either side. Okay, let's go ahead and adhere this to the inside of our covers. How I like to do it is kind of bend the flap toward me and hold it down with my finger, then place that right up next to the front cover and then bend it over. And when I do that, it allows that little gap to perfectly bend around the corner there. We'll repeat that process on this side. Press the flap over. That way I don't overlap it so much that you don't have this nice seamless hinge bend right here. That little trick will help you to get a nice clean spine every single time. Now we're going to move on to the inner spine. We're going to create that first. The way that Sameera constructed her album was by using a hinged piece that goes along and all of the pages attached to them. The piece for the hinged spine, it's a piece of pattern paper that measures 4 inches tall by 6 3/4 inches wide. I'm going to score this a little bit so that we can make those hinges. This is going to be a lot of score marks, but don't fret because I have included all of them in the instructions sheet. This step here, hinge spine, and it shows you in detail all of the different markings is where you will do your scoring. So I'm going to use the works tool for this, but you could use any scoreboard or trim and scoreboard that you have and like. Put it up against the edge and ready to go. And then these are every 1/8 inch, which you will need a scoreboard that has up to an 1/8 inch divide on the score. First, score it at 7/8 inch, which is the mark right before the 1 inch mark. And this first one is really tiny, but it's just for placement. Then I'm going to go ahead and do 1 inch. So there's only an 1/8 of an inch between those first two score lines. Then we'll score at 1.5, 2, 2 1/4, 2 3/4, 3 1/4, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 4 3/4, 5 1/4, 5 3/4, and then one more tiny one at 5 7/8. Okay, now we're going to do a modified accordion fold on this. And how that's going to work is I'm going to kind of form the hinges. So you'll see is our initial 1/8 inch gap on the beginning and end of our score lines. And then you'll have 1/2 inch marks and 1/4 inch marks. The 1/4 inch gaps between score lines are actually the spaces between the pages. So you'll see here how there's a 1/4 of an inch there, a 1/4 of an inch there, a 1/4 of an inch there, and a 1/4 of an inch there. And then the little hinges are made from the 1/2 inch panels between score lines. So we're just going to fold it in a way so that we can achieve that. So I'm going to fold it toward me and back. And now there's my first little hinge. Now there's going to be a 1/4 inch gap. So I'll fold toward me again and back. And then we have our second hinge. And we're going to adhere this so that it makes more sense. And then we'll have another 1/4 inch gap. So it's toward you, toward you. This will make more sense as you do it. So it's a lot of folding toward you and then folding back only on those hinges. And then now I'm at my last little 1/8 inch gap. Okay, so this is what we have now happening. So we have the hinges with their 1/4 inch gap behind them. Now we need to adhere. Where there's two panels that come together, we're just going to put a piece of double-sided tape on one side of each of those 1/2 inch panels. Grab my mat again. Since this is 1/2 inch double-sided tape, it fits perfectly in there. So that's the first 1/2 inch panel. Then I'm going to skip that one, skip the 1/4 inch panel, do adhesive on the next 1/2 inch little panel. Skip, skip, and again. And one last one, skip, skip, and then one more time. It's easiest for me to keep track if I always adhere the same side of the hinge. Then we'll remove our liners. And then we're going to bring those two 1/2 inch hinge panels together and adhere them. I also like to burnish this one more time. So now we have our 4 little hinges. So there are all these folded little hinges with a 1/4 inch gap between them, and then our 2 panels at the end for adhering into the book. Then you'll also have those little 1/8 inch ones. That's for aligning with the spine properly. We're ready to put it into our album. So it's going to sit right inside of our spine. And those little 1/8 inch markings help it align perfectly to the 1 inch chipboard piece that we did. So we're just going to put a little bit of adhesive on the back of this. I'm just going to adhere the whole thing. So I'm just back to my 2 inch. I didn't go all the way to the edge on one of these sides, but that won't matter because we're going to cover it anyway with another piece of inner liner paper for the covers. So it will be nice and hidden there. Oh, one more step before I do this. I should have done this before I pulled my adhesive backer off. I need to angle cut these as well. Sorry that I missed that step before. It's correct in the instruction booklet. I can do it now, but it's just easier to do it before you pull the liners off the back and you have this stickiness happening. Okay, let's go ahead and place this into our spine. And how I like to do that is to kind of stand it up on end so that I can find and align those 1/8 inch score line areas to the little fold in my cover. And then those score markings we made should help it to fold properly. And now we have our hinges in our spine. Now we're almost done with our cover. The last step is just to cover the inside of the front and back covers, and it will also secure the top of this hinge piece here. So for that, I have 2 pieces of pattern paper. They measure 4 by 4 or just a hair smaller than 4 by 4. That's your preference. This is like basically no border around the edge. If you want a little bit of a border, do it at 3 7/8 of a cut. And this we're going to go ahead and adhere into our book as well using the double-sided tape. So now we have our cover complete. So cute. I forgot to mention that I am doing this in the style of Christmas, the same as Sameera did, just pulled from my stash a bunch of Christmas papers and embellishments that I had. You can do this album not Christmas themed as well. So if you have a favorite paper collection, you want to try to make this mini album, don't feel tied to Christmas. You can do it in whatever paper you love. All right, so that's our basic album structure. Let's move to the inside structure of these fun pages. So there's actually a white base page inside each one of these that's a heavy duty white cardstock. And these measure 4 inches tall by 8 inches wide. And we're going to do a little bit of scoring on them. And we're just going to fold them right down the middle. So I'm just going to, since these are 8 inches wide, I'm just going to score on that 8-inch side at 4 inches. And then fold it in the middle. So then we have these little folded pages. And I went ahead and pre-scored my remaining 3 pieces. So there's 4 pages total, 1 for each of our little hinges. Now that we have these, we're going to attach each one of these pages with the fold toward the front of the album. So they'll wrap around the hinges sort of like that and adhere. Now you could always take this interactive album a step further and when you adhere them to your spine, just adhere adhesive here and here, and then you would have a little top pocket. I didn't do that this time, but you could do that as an option. You could have the magic pop-ups and then also little pocket pages here if that's something you wanted to do. That wasn't part of Sameera's tutorial, so I went ahead and did it in her same style, but that's an option and I wanted to let you know that you could do that. For our purposes today, we're just going to adhere this whole thing to each one of these hinges, and we'll do that for all 4 pages. Now we have our 4 pages attached to our 4 hinges. So that's the beginning of our album base. I wanted to show you on my finished sample, this next step is for this inner paper that you see peeking through each of the pop-up pages. So those are 2 pieces that measure 4 by 4, and you're going to adhere these to these white base pages. You're going to have 8 pieces, And I did one that was different for my front page. So you can see I have that inner liner, and then this is that first front page. But from then on, for the pop-up to look its best, you'll want two pieces that are the same on either side of this gap. So let's go ahead and adhere those now to all of these base pages. Then for this last page, there is a pop-up element on this last page that's coordinating with the back cover. So I did cut another piece that matches so that it will be consistent throughout my album. So I'll adhere that inside here now. All right, so now we've got all of our base pages covered, and we're ready to start working on the pop-up elements. So like I said before, this front page doesn't have a pop-up element in Sameera's book. It's just more of a decorative introductory page. And then this first page will be our first pop-up window page. For the pop-up pages, I used the same papers. These pop-up pages measure, again, the same as the base page, so 4 by 8. And we're going to score them a little bit differently, though, than we did the base pages in order to create that little pop-up window. Let's grab our scoreboard again. And we're going to score each one of these 4 papers along the 8-inch line again. But this time, instead of scoring just at 4 right at the middle, we're going to make 3 score lines. One at the 2-inch mark, one at the 4-inch mark, and one at the 6-inch mark. And we'll do that for all 4 pieces. So I've already scored these other 3, and then we're going to fold them accordion style again. This time we're going to fold toward us, then away. So it's a traditional accordion fold. And then on the last score line, fold towards you again. And then we'll have this type of accordion happening. Let's go ahead and fold all of the rest of our papers. Okay, now we're ready to punch or cut a hole in the center of each one of these pop-ups to make that fun little pop-up window. In Sameera's video, she traced something into a circle shape and then traced that circle shape onto her pages and then cut it out. I'm going to take a different approach and use my Revolution die cutting machine to cut the circles from each one of these. So I have a set of dies that are these concentric circles, and I looked for one that was the same measurement. This one is a 3-inch circle, and from my best guess, that's about the size that Sameera used in her album. And we're just going to cut this circle using the die out of each one of these pages. I like to use a little bit of washi tape to help me center it when I'm placing something where I want it exactly centered. And now I'm centering it within this center panel and along that center fold score line. I'm just going to use a little bit of washi tape. This won't damage my paper at all, but we'll just make sure my die stays right where I want it to stay. Then I'm using the base, the magnetic mat, and the die cut plate. And we'll just sandwich that together and run it through the Revolution. Now we have our circle cut out of our center page. So I'm going to repeat that for the remaining 4 pages. There's our last page. We can put our revolution away. I just found that to be the easiest way for me to cut the circle out of the center. If you don't have a revolution or a die cutting machine with a circle die, then you could always use Sameera's technique and trace something that's about 3 inches wide and then trace it onto this, centering it on that same area of in the middle of that 4-inch square in the middle of these panels, and trace it and cut it by hand. Or you could use a circle punch if you have one that's big enough, or you could make your circle a little bit smaller. Your window would just be a little bit smaller if you had like a 2.5-inch circle punch. So those are 3 options for getting this window look. We're ready to add these to our album pages. So again, I'm going to skip this first page, and then I'm going to choose which papers I want to coordinate. You could always have them be the same or different. And I did mine different papers, from the liners to the little magical pop-up. And now we're going to just put adhesive. You can kind of see the idea here without it being adhered. We're just going to put adhesive on the back of these 2 side panels and adhere them flush with the left edge and flush with the right edge of the page, leaving that center window panel free and clear of adhesive. And then as it folds, you'll see you get that really cool pop-up effect. Okay, and there's our last little pop-up page. Now, since we are people, not machines, these may need a little extra folding to get the creases in exactly the right place, because our score lines may not have been perfectly aligned, or our gluing may not have been perfectly aligned. So don't feel afraid to kind of press down on your book and adjust, let those little score lines kind of adjust and find their place to where they need to fold to lay right in the book. Hopefully they're pretty close to right on, but we have a little margin of error because we're people. So it's okay to go ahead and kind of adjust as needed so that your book closes nicely. Now we have our basic structure of our book. The fun part is in decorating. So to finish off our inside, I just thought I would flip through what I did on my book and give you some ideas of what you could do on your book, and then we'll work on the pom-poms for the cover. I combined, like I said, all different collections. So these are just in a stash. I have a box that I just have all of my Christmas embellishments in, and I mix and match, and they look great together. Here I added some little tickets, strip of pattern paper, some more little stickers. And then a tip that I have for you is that if you are going to cross this fold, just make sure you score whatever piece. So you can see here, the tree kind of comes around the corner, and I just scored it right there and just kind of pinched it and bent it to the shape of the pop-up so that it would also pop up correctly. Same here, I kind of just made sure I placed my stickers to the right of the center fold or to the left of the center fold. And then if you do that, then you don't need to score them to wrap around. But if you want something that's going to come around overlapping both sides, you can do that, just score it down the middle. These are some little journaling cards and stickers. This one is a good example. I wanted to use this big Hey Santa piece, and you can see it's actually floating up into the circle. So I cut a little piece that could be a little support for the end of my flag. I didn't want the flag to tear, and so I secured it on the back of this piece here, and then to the back of the flag, and then scored it next to it. Now you can see kind of holds up that flag element that I wanted to kind of be floating into my window. So that's another technique that you can do. And it extended past my side and over here. So it actually has 2 score lines. So I scored it right there and scored it right there so that it would work properly with the fold of the magic pop-up. Then I added stickers, some sentiments. This is another example of folding and creasing. So it doesn't really overlap my window, but it does overlap this side piece and then over onto my window pop-up. So I just scored that piece of ephemera right there. And then this piece right here, you can see I kind of scored it naturally. I just put it in and then folded it to find the center of where this sentiment needed to fold to be within the window, not cover whatever I'm going to put in the window, but still fold properly with my album. Now, one more tip. Sameera left her album kind of blank. I don't know her intention of what she was planning to do to put inside of her album, but I kind of explored the idea of adding some photos back there in the windows. So I printed my photos to be 3.5 wide by 4 inches tall. And then I'm going to just slip them in here and adhere them just along the very back edge of each photo into my album, just inside, right behind the edge of this pop-up page. Now, if you know that you are going to put photos in here, this will cover up this inside paper. So remember when we lined all the base pages, all the white pages with pattern paper? If you're going to put in a full photo, that's going to cover that. So you don't necessarily need to do those pattern paper pieces. You could just leave your base page white if you plan to cover it with a photo. So let's go ahead and do that now. I'm only going to put a little bit of adhesive on the side. You could use a really thin double-sided tape. Like if you had 1/8 inch red tape or 1/8 inch double-sided tape, that might work a little bit better because you just want the tiniest little bit of adhesive, or even a liquid glue would work. Since I don't have that with me today, I'm just going to use my tape runner and hope for the best. I'm going to press it in there and adhere it. Then you can see how you can kind of see that picture, but then the picture folds back with the page and you still don't interfere with that pop-up piece there. Let's put another one in on this one. That other one was kind of a scenic photo because I had a bigger house element here and I didn't want it to block the faces in my picture. This one has a little bit bigger opening, so I'm going to go ahead and add this one here where you can see my daughter and her husband. I'm just reaching into the window and kind of pinching to adhere my photo inside the page. So there's the second one. Now that one has a little photo that pops up. So you can see what I mean about not needing to do this liner paper if you know you're going to fill the whole window with the photo. You could always just do a little photo that's peeking out from one side if you still like the look of seeing all of the pretty paper inside there, which there's something to be said for that. So it's really up to you whether you want photos in yours or if you want to do something else with yours, if you want to do journaling or writing inside of there, or just more fun ephemera and just have it a pretty lookbook. That's up to you. I think for me, I'm just going to go ahead and add that picture there. I'll do it off camera. And then this picture here, this last picture of them decorating the tree. So I just think that's so fun. Such a fun little way to fill those windows with memories. Now let's work on this front part of pom-poms. So my pom-poms I only used 6. On Sameera's album, she used more, so I don't know if she made smaller pom-poms than me, but 6 worked for me, and so that's what I went with. And I'm going to make it in the same way that Sameera did, which is using the Works tool again. So we're going to pull our Works tool out. We'll pull out 2 of the clear pegs from the storage slot right there. And for these tiny pom-poms, they're just itty bitty, we're going to put our pegs right next to each other. So it doesn't really matter which set of holes you want to put them in, as long as they are right next to each other. You can kind of see there with no spaces between them. And then we're going to build our pom-pom on these pegs. So I just have a little bit of green yarn. Sameera also did hers with red and green pom-poms. So it's really up to you. I just did 1 yarn for mine. I toyed with the idea of doing 2 shades of green or red and green. So it's just whatever you land on. Now to make a pom-pom on the Works tool, you tie the end of the yarn around one of the pegs to secure it. And then you just wrap around those 2 pegs. Now for my pom-poms, I like them pretty dense. So I wrap it about 50 times. So let's do that now. Okay, that was 50 times. Now, For these small ones, that's about the max that you can do, is 50 times around with a normal weight yarn. If your yarn is chunkier or thinner, you may be able to do fewer or more wraps and still get the same size pom-pom. Now we're going to cut about an 6 to 8 inch strip, another length of yarn, and slide it between the two pegs underneath the yarn that we have wrapped. I like to bring it around to the front. I just find it easier to work from this side rather than on the very top, but that's a personal preference, so that's up to you. And now we're just going to tie it in a knot. Now, because I have done so much yarn on this tiny little pom-pom, I can't quite get it as tight as I like to have a tight pom-pom. So I just did one overhand half of a knot, and I'm going to pull my yarn up off my peg before I finish. It's like I'm cinching and pulling the yarn off at the same time so that I can get it as tight as I like. And then I like to do a twist. So I twist my yarn, basically change direction of the yarn, and wrap it around one more time because I like it to be super secure and tight on my pom-poms. I push the limits of them because I like them to be really fluffy. And then I'm going to tie my final knot. I'm going to get it really, really tight and just do a square knot. And now I have this little disc of yarn. Now, just like any other pom-pom, we're going to put our scissors into the two sides of the loops and trim those yarn loops. I like to use spring-loaded scissors when I'm doing pom-poms because I do a lot of trimming and I find it's more comfortable in my hand because if I'm making 6 pom-poms, I'm going to do a lot of little haircuts on these pom-poms and I want them to be really cute and tidy. So these scissors are my favorite for that. You can tell it's really tight because I'm having to find my way into those loops with my tip of my scissors. Then I just kind of fluff it. I grab my 2 strings that I tied with, kind of fluff it and make sure I got all the loops cut. Looks like I did. And then you can see this doesn't really look like a nice tidy pom-pom at this stage. But what I need to do is give it a little haircut. I'm going to move this out of the way. And then I just use my scissors, and you're going to cut off more than you think you need to. And again, this is personal preference, but this is how I get my pom-poms to look so tight and tidy. Is I cut off not only the like obvious strings, but I intentionally turn and shape my pom-pom. And these guys are like 1-inch pom-poms. They can be really, really small. So I like to leave these 2 pieces that I tied the string with attached until the very end so that I can cut them last. So that if I need to, I can hang on to them like this. It just gives you a better grip on the pom-pom. Don't forget to do the bottom where those attach. You're just aiming for smooth-ish. Again, once you get all these pom-poms on here and decorated, you're not striving for perfection. You're just striving for neat. Neat and tidy and a shape that you're happy with. You can see it's starting to smooth out. And I wasn't shy about like being kind of aggressive with how much I cut off. And then when I'm tidying up at the very end, I'm taking off a lot less, just as I'm kind of curving my scissors around to get a good shape. Okay, now I'm to the point where I'm going to cut off these last 2 strings above my knot. Then I like to go like this and just give it a good fluffing in my hand. Now you can see some little crazy hairs came out of yarn. So now I can look at it one last time and kind of tidy up anything that maybe a loop that I missed cutting through, which is right there. Or just some little stray hairs that were tucked in there and I didn't realize that they were longer than the rest of them. Stray pieces of yarn. Okay, so now we have our cute, tidy little 1-inch pom-pom. So I just repeated that process 6 times and stacked them in a pyramid. So there's 3 along the bottom, then 2, and then the final top one. And I just adhered those with hot glue. Now for the base right here, I just hand cut a little tree trunk, which is what Sameera did as well. And so I just took a scrap of brown paper, whatever color you like, and I just kind of said, that's sort of tree trunky looking, right? And just kind of like, this one's not going to be exactly the same as that one, but it's fine, right? Just looks like a tree trunk. So I adhered that down first, and then I built my tree on top of that. Then I just added a little sentiment flag to kind of mirror the way that Sameera designed her cover, some little enamel dots and a sparkly star. So you could punch a star. This was one I just had again in my Christmas stash, so I pulled it out and used it. So now we have our finished album. How cute is that? So fun, so festive. I hope this helps you to have a better idea. I didn't glue these last two pictures in, but you get the idea. Have a better idea of how to make this complete album, give you some extra steps that you may have wondered about when watching the reel. And we're grateful to Sameera for making this for our feed and hope that this is a happy holidays for you. And remember, you can make this for any time of year just by switching up your papers and switching up the design. Maybe you do a pom pom flower on the front, or maybe you just decorate the front and hang some pom poms from the spine. That would be cute too. Using those same techniques, you could do all kinds of mini albums. So good luck, have fun creating. Make sure to tag us at We Are Makers if you post your projects. We'd love to see what you are making with these tutorials. Have a great day.